Yeah. Though we know who we are, yet we know not what we may be. So maybe I'm the one, or maybe I'm crazy. I'm from.
Welcome back to your No Malarkey Guide to Python and Programming. My name is Kalu, and we're going to continue following the Kalu principles to learning a new discipline. What that means is that we follow a bottom-up process, not a top-down process. We follow and learn by example, not learning through rules. And most importantly, we learn through inductive reasoning and not through deductive reasoning. What does that mean? That means that we don't really write down a whole bunch of rules and notes about how to do X, and then we read those notes and rules about how to do X to do it. Instead, we just make many projects, and we do many examples. And by doing these examples, we hope that we're going to gain an understanding of the rules and the steps that we need to know about to do a certain thing. So this is what we call inductive learning, where we learn from example to be able to replicate another example, as opposed to learning by rules to be able to replicate whatever the rule is meant for us to do. And we're going to continue along with this tutorial. What we did last time was we set up this form where we could enter a job title and description and hit submit, and it'll submit. We want to add some JS, JavaScript, and CSS cascade and style sheet rules in here to make this a bit more cool. What we want is, by default, we don't want this form to show. So by default, we don't want our user to see this form. What we want them to do is click on this button. And this button, instead of saying begin, it's going to say add user, or add a post, add a job listing. And I'm going to do Control S, Alt Tab, Control R. And we want this button, when clicked, to reveal this form. So to do that, we have to add some CSS code that says, hey, hide this form, make this form invisible, make it transparent, and make the height 0. So first we're going to make this transparent. In order to do that, we're going to add a style attribute right here inside of our form element. And just to warn you guys, we normally do not add CSS code this way. We normally link to a CSS document, such as the one in main.css right here that we see in job site, jobs app, static, jobs app, asset, CSS, main.css, and we can click that and we see a whole bunch of CSS code. So that is normally how we add CSS code and add styling to our website. Another way we can do it, and the way we're going to do it right now for purposes of brevity, shortness, and just learning purposes, is we're going to add it through a style attribute right here inside of our form element. And we're going to give it the attribute, we're going to give this style attribute the value of a CSS code. So that is going to say, let's get the opacity and let's set that to 0. And we're going to save that, Alt Tab, Control R to refresh, and we see that this now has 0 opacity. If you don't know what opacity means, it just means the transparency is completely see-through when it's 0, and it's completely solid or completely opaque when it's 1. So now that we've done that, why don't we go ahead and add an additional line of code where we add the heights, and let's set this height to 0 pixels, and we're going to do Alt Tab, Control S, Alt Tab, Control R, and we can see that it now has 0 pixels. That's great. The next thing we want to do is we want to be able to, when we click on this, we want it to show the form. So first, why don't I just add an ID? Right now, when we click on this, it takes us to this to this element. And that's because we have a hash sign here that says, hey, take us to an ID, and take us to this ID called 1. And here we have all our sections have the ID called 1. It takes us to the very first one. Instead, let's add an ID here. Oops, Control Z, space ID, and let's call it post form. And let's change this to post form. So what we want to do is, so now when we refresh here and we click, it takes us to the beginning of where our post form would be, which is invisible. But what we want to do is say, we want our post form to show up when you click on this link. So to do that, we have to add some JavaScript files. So first, let's link to the JavaScript file that we will soon create. So we're going to write script tab, and that's going to do that, autocomplete that for us. And we're going to do src equals, and in here we're going to write curly brackets, %, static, space, single quotation mark, jobs, underscore app, slash assets, slash js, slash, and we're going to write this file that doesn't exist yet. Let's call it our custom scripts.js, single quotation mark, space, %, curly bracket. and this doesn't exist yet, so why don't we go ahead and create it. We're going to do file, new to create a new file, and then we're going to do file, control, save as, or control shift S, and we're going to save this in desktop, job site, jobs app, static, jobs app, assets, JS, and just like we said we would name it, we're going to call it this our custom script.js. I did control paste by control V, and we're going to save that, and we're going to write our first JavaScript code. Hey, this is our first code. In this code, this console.log just says print. It's very similar to our print statement in Python, which we saw earlier. So I'm going to make sure that I save this. Right now we see that it has a gray dot. We're going to save it. It's going to change to a gray X. And now that this is saved, I'm going to refresh. First, before I refresh, I'm going to open inspect element and click on console. This is going to show us, this is going to be the console of our JavaScript interpreter. And every browser has one. If you're on Firefox, you can do inspect element. If you're on Chrome, there's like a inspect something, and it's the very last one I think on Chrome. But now that this is open, I'm going to click on console, and notice that I have JavaScript checked off. I don't want to see all the I have CSS checked off. I don't want to see all the CSS notifications. So you can have it on if you want. That it's up to you. So I'm going to refresh this, and here is our first code. And we can see that's exactly what we print. We're going to say our first JavaScript code. And we're going to save that and refresh. Here's our first JavaScript code. That is great, but we want to do something a bit more exciting. What we want to do is we want to create an event handler. Or we want to say, I don't want to call it an event handler. That may confuse you. Let's just put it real simple. What we want to do is when a user clicks on this link, we want to change this form's opacity from 0 to 1 and the height from 0 to 160. So on click, change the height of this form. What we're going to say is on click and change the height of this form. Well, not exactly that. We're going to say on click, run this code or run this function that we're going to create. So let's call this function show post form. And this doesn't exist yet, but we're going to make it exist right now. I'm going to copy it just so we remember this name, and I'm going to go here in our JavaScript. We're going to create that function, and the name is show post form parentheses semicolon, and here we're going to write the code we want to happen whenever you click on that button. So right now, before we implement the code to actually change the opacity and change the height, let's just give ourselves our note. Let's say, hey, this button has been clicked. And let's say okay, that's good. And let's add a semicolon here so this annoying yellow dot can go away. Let's save that, Control R, and when we refresh, we immediately see that this is our JavaScript code. This line prints line 1 in our custom line 1 in our custom script. But when we click here, then hey, this button has been clicked. Line 4 of our code runs. This one right here. Console.log. So let's do something more interesting. Instead of just printing something, we want to actually grab this form. We're going to grab it using this ID name that we created, and we're going to change the CSS. We're going to change the opacity to 1 and the height to 160. Just to show you an example of how we change CSS code using JavaScript, we're going to write some code in our console. We can write a JavaScript code in the console of whatever browser you're in. So to do that, I'm going to do, let's do form equals $ parentheses single quotation mark. I'm gonna write this pound sign to say I want to select an ID, and the name of our ID is post underscore form. You can see here is this ID right here, post form, and then I'm going to close that quotation mark and press enter, and here we've selected that form. And now I want to say I want to change the CSS. I want to change the CSS to this form.css, and I want to make the opacity, let's say first I want to make the height 160 pixels. And I'm going to save that, and before I press enter, I'm just going to be looking right here, and I'm going to press enter, and there it is. The height has been changed. I'm going to press up on my keyboard to give me the last line of code I wrote. In here, erase height, change it to opacity, and erase this and change it to 0. I'm sorry, to 1, to change the opacity to 1. Watch what happens when I press enter. There it is. It now shows it. Oh, why does it have this little thing? Anyways, it now shows our form. The opacity is back. So if we refresh the page, all the code we wrote on here goes away. So it doesn't actually change the page. It just changed what it looks like for you. This is where we can test some code. So now that we've tested that code that it works, let's actually write that code for real. We're gonna write it inside of our custom script. So we're gonna say form equals, and just like we did before, we're gonna say we want to select an ID, and the name of that ID is post_form. And once we selected that ID, we want to change the CSS to make its opacity to 0. I'm sorry, to 1. And then we want to change its height to 160 pixels. And let's save this, and we're going to go back here and we're going to press it. There we go. Presto. Look how amazing that is. It comes right up for us. That is so amazing. I'm happy with that. So you guys have done a lot. You've really done a lot of work. We're going to refresh it just to see again how beautiful it is. And we're going to do one more thing to make this even more beautiful. We're going to add a transition. So here I'm going to say transition equals, transition colon, and let's do 5 seconds just to see what that looks like. So transition equals 5 seconds. Now when I click here, a transition happens. Look at that. And that transition is really slow, so let's do it 1 second instead of 5 seconds. I was just showing it for your effects. So I'm gonna close this now, and when we click here, we should get that nice little transition. There we go. All right. Wait, let me refresh that. Did it? Let's see it again. We should get that nice little transition. There it is. All right, so we've done a lot, guys. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get this website. We've created a full-fledged web app from beginning to end, and users can just add new postings and they come up automatically right here. The next thing we're going to do is this only exists on your local computer. We want to get this to exist on your from your local computer to a remote computer where anyone could go to this web address and anyone can visit this amazing web app that you created. Why don't we change this name right here from highlights? Let's change it to jobs board. And let's see that, jobs board. So that's what we want, anyone to be able to see this amazing website that you've created. What that means is we have to buy a remote server. We have to set up our remote server, and then we have to install Django onto it, and then find some way to get this app from our local computer onto our remote computer and make it accessible that anyone who visits that remote computer's IP address will be served this app. We're going to do that next tutorial. It's going to be really exciting, really easy, and you guys have come so far. Please share this tutorial with your friends. You know, there's a whole bunch of yuppie tutorials that make programming to be some huge intellectual exercise. It's not about that. Just follow steps. I say programmers, and my brother told me once that programmers in today's gold rush, programmers are just like people who used to dig for gold in the previous gold rush in California. We're just using tools to make people rich who want to find gold, and those are the entrepreneurs. And programmers are just people who are shoveling. Just think of it as that. It's not some great intellectual endeavor. It's just repeating a set of steps that achieve some goal. That's all it is. So don't intellectualize this. Don't go studying what data types is, what a function is, and the best way to implement different design patterns. Just do by example. Trust me, I put a lot of energy into learning about the best way to learn a new discipline. And I come from a background that, there's not really a lot of very yuppie people in the background that I grew up in. And when I got more educated and went to university, went to law school, and went to really educated environments in Silicon Valley, I found that there was this kind of front to make really simple endeavors seem like some big intellectual exercise. And that really harms the ability of people who don't know about this to get into the field. So I want to encourage all the beginners, the young people, 8-year-olds to 80-year-olds, that this is simple. This isn't some intellectual feat. It's just repeating a set of steps. Anybody could do it. So get that perception of that pretentious programmer in your head who's like, I don't know if you could do it. Everyone could do it. We're just going to follow a set of steps. We've written our complete web app. Now we're going to set up our first remote server. You've done a great job. Tell your friends about this tutorial and get them to do this. That way, if you have questions, you can hope that maybe your friend figure it out. All right, see you guys later.
only hope.